Chapter 5. The professional liability of real estate licensees. A licensee is required to file a suspicious transaction report when they think a transaction is related to a money laundering or terrorist financing offense and it meets which of the following thresholds of proof? Reasonable grounds to suspect. A licensee is representing a client who is not wanting to put their name on any document that would connect them with the property. In addition, the client is continually over-justifying and over-explaining the purchase. Which of the following with respect to this transaction is true? These facts are known as MLTF indicators. The standard for filing a suspicious transaction report is reasonable grounds to suspect. This standard is best described as a step above simple suspicion and a step below reasonable grounds to believe. Which of the following is true with respect to laundering money through real estate transactions? Mortgage payments with dirty money are one way that criminals launder money. Which of the following is true with respect to deceit and fraudulent misrepresentation? When a misrepresentation is false and is made either knowingly or recklessly, the person making the misrepresentation will be liable for damages and tort. Which of the following is not a reason that real estate is attractive for money launderers? Real estate licensees cannot report suspicious transactions. Larry is a real estate licensee. During negotiations for the sale of a property with a well water system, the buyer asked how reliable a water source the well was. Larry, relying only on information from the seller, told the buyer that the well was reliable and supplied sufficient water for normal domestic uses. After completion of the sale, the buyer discovered that the water available was completely inadequate for domestic purposes because of a serious water shortage problem. Which of the following statements is true? 1. Larry is not liable to the buyer in negligence because he exercised reasonable care and skill under the circumstances. 2. The seller does not owe a duty of disclosure of this defect, annual water shortage, to the buyer. 3. The seller is not liable to anyone for his misrepresentation because he is not a real estate professional. 4. The correct answer is none of the above. Which of the following describes a method of identifying an individual that meets a licensee's Know Your Client obligations under the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing Act? Matching personal information provided by the client to a Canadian credit file that has been in existence for at least 3 years. A trading services representative must never promise to buy or sell any real estate belonging to a prospective buyer, unless at the time of making the promise, a signed statement setting forth the details of the promise is given to the person to whom the promise has been made. Tina had a listing on a house that she wanted to sell to Tom. Tom didn't want to make an offer on Tina's listing because his own house had not sold. Tina offered to buy Tom's present house if it did not sell in time to close on her listing. Tina signed a statement containing the details of her promise and gave it to Tom. Tom then signed an offer on Tina's listing, which was accepted. Tom, now suffering from buyer's remorse, is unhappy with the arrangement and has reported Tina to the British Columbia Financial Services Authority, BCFSA. Which of the following statements is true? Tina did nothing wrong in making this promise because she provided all the terms of the promise in writing to Tom prior to his entering the contract of purchase and sale. Which of the following statements is true? A licensee is not required to provide opinions to buyers on areas outside their expertise. Rather, it is the buyer's responsibility to seek the opinion of a qualified expert. Which of the following is not a requirement for a successful claim of negligent misrepresentation? An existing contractual relationship between the parties. Which of the following is true with respect to vicarious liability? Employers can be vicariously liable for fraud and assault if such acts were committed in the course of an employee's employment. After determining that there are reasonable grounds to suspect that a transaction is related to a money laundering or terrorist financing offense, when must a licensee file a suspicious transaction report? As soon as practicable. Which of the following options is true with respect to fiduciary duties? The most important duties that an agent owes to the principal are fiduciary duties. Which of the following statements with respect to fiduciary duties is true? The duty of loyalty requires the agent to act solely for the benefit of the principal. Which of the following is an example of an action that a criminal may take during the placement stage of the money laundering process? Arranging for multiple people to deposit small amounts of cash at different financial institutions. Which of the following is true with respect to suspicious transaction reports, STR? The threshold for submitting an STR is reasonable grounds to suspect. Which of the following accurately states the stages in the money laundering process? Placement, layering, and integration. Which of the following does the plaintiff not need to prove to succeed in a claim of negligence? That the defendant intended to cause injury to the plaintiff. Which of the following is true with respect to the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing Act, the PCMLTFA? Trading services licensees in British Columbia have obligations to identify money laundering activities under the PCMLTFA. In order for a trading services representative to be liable for a negligent misrepresentation, certain facts must be proven. Which of the following is not a requirement for establishing a claim based upon negligent misrepresentation? A contractual relationship must exist between the representative and the person to whom the representation is made. Which of the following is not one of the required elements of negligent misrepresentation? The defendant must have known that the statement was false at the time that it was made. Susan Seller discovered a secret arrangement between their agent and Bella Buyer where Susan's agent would give some of the commission payable by Susan to their agent directly to Bella. Based on this situation, which of the following statements is true? The agent's nondisclosure is a breach of their fiduciary duty to Susan, and as a consequence, the agent may not be entitled to the commission claimed. The obligation to identify a client under the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, and Terrorist Financing Act is triggered when a licensee receives $10,000 or more in a single cash transaction. It is a violation of the real estate services rules for a licensee to promise an owner that, if the owner enters into a listing agreement with the licensee's brokerage, then the licensee will sell the owner's property within a certain time, unless a signed statement setting forth the details of the promise is given to the person to whom the promise is made when the promise is made. Bobby Buyer purchased a home in an area with landslide risks. However, at the time of purchase, Bobby's licensee did not make any inquiries about landslide risks in the area. 3 months after Bobby's purchase, a landslide occurred 3 lots away from his property. There is no physical damage to Bobby's property, but the value of the property decreased significantly. Upon a brief investigation, Bobby discovered that his neighboring property had previously been the subject of a landslide and that there were public government reports about it. Bobby has started a claim in negligence for economic loss against his licensee for not investigating and alerting him of any landslide risks. Which of the following statements is true? When assessing the standard of care, a court will need to determine whether a reasonable buyer's agent would have made inquiries as to the landslide risk relating to the property. If a licensee has reasonable grounds to suspect that a transaction or attempted transaction is related to the commission or attempted commission of a money laundering or terrorist financing offense, they must do which of the following? File a suspicious transaction report, STR, as soon as practicable. In order for a licensee to be liable for damages caused by a negligent misstatement, certain facts must be proved. Which of the following does not need to be proved? The licensee making the statement had a contractual relationship with the person to whom they gave the advice. Which of the following statements about FINTRAC's administrative monetary penalties, AMPs, is true? FINTRAC is required to publish the names of the individuals or entities that have committed violations resulting in an AMP. A trading services representative must never promise to sell real estate belonging to a prospective client as an inducement to enter into a listing agreement with the licensee's brokerage, unless at the time of making the promise a signed statement setting forth the details of the promise is given to the person to whom the promise has been made. Mark, an experienced real estate licensee, showed a home in Lions Bay to John, who was a first-time home buyer. John asked Mark whether the house had termites. It was located in a forested area, and John told Mark that he was afraid that this location might have termite infestation problems. Mark told him that there were no termite infestation problems in the house. After the sale was completed, John discovered that the house had a serious termite problem, which would cost a considerable amount to repair. On what grounds might Mark be liable to John in a lawsuit? Negligent misrepresentation. Which of the following could a defendant use as a defense to a claim in negligence against them? The damage suffered by the plaintiff was not reasonably foreseeable by a person in the defendant's position.